Here's a mystery. So people on the centrist liberal front and on the classic conservative front, the traditionalist conservative front, are concerned about institutional capture. So I've thought this through. Where's the fulcrum point for institutional capture? And as far as I can tell, given that 50% of the typical state's budget is spent on education, the leverage point is capture of the education system. And then you might ask, well, because that's 50% of all the money that's spent at the state level. Then you might ask, well, who's captured the education spending? And the answer is, well, teachers and administrators that are associated with the public education system. Then you might ask, well, who's captured them? And the answer to that is, well, the faculties of education. How? Well, they have a monopolistic hammerlock on teacher certification. And then the question is, well, why? Like the faculties of education, they produce the research literature produced by the faculties of education in the last 50 years has had a devastating negative effect on public education in the US. Time and time again, whole word reading, learning styles, the self-esteem movement, multiple intelligences, like you name it. If the faculties of education put it forward, it was wrong scientifically and disastrous socially. They attract terrible students, unconscientious students, most particularly, who are attracted by the blandishments of being able to get a sinecure position with plenty of vacation and a well-established pension without any academic excellence whatsoever. And they're woke to the hilt. So why the hell have conservatives gone along with the game of allowing the faculties of education to maintain a monopolistic hammerlock on teacher certification? I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, they had for a long time, but that's changed. In Arizona and Florida and many other states, they're revamping the certification. I've worked with folks, and I've always advocated to actually just get rid of that certification cartel altogether, and saying, hey, look, if you have a bachelor's degree in physics, you're qualified to teach physics at a high school level, for example. And conservatives are doing that, but the problem is that while that was the initial entry point, and we know that from the literature of the critical pedagogists. That was literally their plan. They laid it out in the 80s and 90s. They implemented it. They have, the kind of dominance over that. But while that was the genesis or the origin, it's almost, and we should fix it, yes, but it's now a small part of the problem because you have the teaching corps, you have the teachers' unions, you have the administration, you have the DEI bureaucrats, you have the actual pedagogical material that is created. And so you can't simply say that was the genesis of the problem. We can go back and solve the genesis and everything else will evaporate. You now have a multiplicity of kind of, the locus is not singular anymore of the problem. And so we actually have to do a lot more. And the biggest problem though, even worse than the capture of the ed schools, is that these are centralized bureaucracies that are in theory accountable to the democratic votes of the people. Legislatures actually have oversight. The big problem is that legislators have really done nothing, and they've let these bureaucracies move anti-democratically to install this ideology. Look, none of the legislators in red states said we want to have mandatory DEI departments in all of our K through 12 schools. None of them voted for critical race theory in the curriculum. None of them voted for radical gender theory in Florida, in Tennessee, in Texas. But the activists within the state sector moved against the democratic will of the people, without the consent of the governed, and installed them through a bureaucratic infiltration, let's say. And so if that is the status quo, and I think it's undoubtedly it is, I've done the reporting, it's been documented over and over, that's the actual question. Well, what do you do about that? You have a bureaucracy that has now gone totally rogue. It has overstepped its autonomy. It has totally transgressed the values of the public. It has acted without the consent of the legislature. This is a political question. And our friends in the center left, really what their aversion is to conflict. They maintain this position as the enlightened centrist. They feel like if they explain it well enough, they feel like if they go on a podcast, they feel like if they can write a jazzy paper, that the world will conform to their good thinking. That's never how it works. you have people that their livelihoods now, hundreds of thousands of people, depends on pushing this ideology within the public institutions. And so the question is, what do you do in that case? And the kind of classical liberal solution is a dodge, because what it does is it avoids the political nature of the question. These are government institutions. These are institutions that are created and funded by taxpayers and that are under the regulatory power of the legislature. And so the legislature that has abdicated is now starting to move in, I think, through my work, through Governor DeSantis, through other state legislators. They're now moving in to say, hey, wait a minute, we've let this go rogue for too long. We need to actually say, these are political questions, and they by nature, by their very nature, by their essential nature, will require political solutions, not merely the kind of light touch, approach of people who think that signing a letter, an open letter, is going to get the job done.